I think that actually just reminded me when you say their brain comes online. It's also like, when we try and explain everything to people when they're offline, they're like, you're kind of like, I'm going to give you all of this information, and you just get that blank stare, and you're like, they're not even like, they can't even hear anything I'm saying here. So I think being able to recognize that and kind of go, okay, let's see if we can bring them online first, and then we can talk to them a bit more about it, and they become a bit receptive then. So.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Informed Chiropractor. This is Dr. Don McDonald, your host, and I'm heading back to Ireland. And as we're doing this recording, it's St. Patrick's Day. As you can see, my guest, she'll be wearing her nice green sweater coming from the St. Patrick's Day parade. Those who are listening to the podcast, you won't be able to see it, but just imagine it's a beautiful green sweater. My next guest is Dr. Erina Olsen, and she's a graduate from the Zealand College of Chiropractic in 2000. She grew up in New Zealand, and then now she practices in Ireland. She's been in our program, the Informed Chiropractor, and come to quite a few of our events that's been in the UK and Ireland, and has done the McDonald's Safety Corridor Protocol. And she's just a lovely lady to hang out with. And I am very pleased to introduce Dr. Erina Olsen. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
This is awesome. So it's funny because I was researching your history. I always like to research the history before I get a guest on, and so it's always interesting to see you grew up in New Zealand and now you practice in Ireland. So we're gonna get into the story of how that happened. But let's just go into what interested you, or how did you discover chiropractic in the first place? I
kind of always describe it as, a lot of people say chiropractic finds us, we don't find it. And I feel like that happened to me, definitely. And I think when I was 11 years old, my mother actually took me to an osteopath. And that was my first experience with that kind of therapy, or
like hands-on
seeing
approach.
anyone. I think I probably had maybe a massage before that. Yeah. And I had one of those experiences where I went into this guy and I couldn't breathe through my nose. I was just really congested, had lots of sinus issues as a child. And he did this like woo-woo muscle testing stuff, and I had no idea what was going on, but I was like, I could hold my arm up one minute and the next I couldn't, and he manipulated my neck. I think osteopaths call it manipulation. So he did that to my neck, and it was like literally I walked in there not being able to breathe, and I walked out being able to breathe, and I was like, this is really cool. So I spent most of my high school education believing that I was going to study osteopathy and become an osteopath. Oh. And I had a guidance counsellor in school all the way through who was like, I think you should try chiropractic. Why don't you try chiropractic? And when it kind of came down to it, I was like, okay, well, let's just investigate and see what the difference is. And I was really fortunate to meet and talk to, I think somebody might have said to me, look, you should talk to a chiropractor. And there were some amazing chiropractors in my area. There were some amazing chiropractors in New Zealand, still are, of course. But I spoke to this woman, and she said, if you're interested in chiropractic, what you should do is go to a chiropractor, like go as a client. And I went to a practice with two amazing chiropractors, and they just completely took me under their wing. From the minute I said I'm thinking about chiropractic as a career, they were just like, right, you're part of the family, come on in. But also they took me through, like, they were really principled chiropractors, and they took me through a whole like new client workup and x-rays and the whole works, and explained it really well to me. And then they kind of mentored me through while I was looking at where I would go or where I could go to college, because at the time the New Zealand College wasn't there. So I would have had to go to Australia or England or America. And one of the chiropractors in the practice that I was seeing actually kind of took me aside one day, and he said, look, there is a school in the works in New Zealand if you can hold off for a year or two. So that's what I did in the end. I ended up doing my science degree first at an established university, and subsequently going to the New Zealand College, and I graduated in the second cohort. So it's the second lot of graduates out of the college.
Because I think it was who was it? Like, who was all in your class?
So Heidi Horvath was in my class. who else? Marina Fox, who's still in the school, was there. So many chiropractors, I'm going to forget all of their names.
But yeah, it's because it seems kind of crazy because the first couple of years there, it was kind of stressful for you guys, right? Because then you have to, like, they hadn't been accredited yet, and you had to make sure you pass all your tests so that they can do it. Yeah, because I think Kelly Holt, I think he was in the first class. Was he in the first class?
He was in the first class, so he was in the year ahead of us.
Because when I interviewed him, he was like, they had no pressure, he says, but if you go through and you don't pass your board exams, then we don't get accreditation for the school. And I was like...
Yeah, and they actually had to take an extra exam as well, because I think it's like the accrediting people were sort of like, well, we want you to take this exam and your board exams.
Wow.
And that was kind of like, if enough of your students don't pass this, like, you're done, you're not getting accreditation. So yeah, it was pretty stressful, but I think it was also a great experience because there weren't that many of us. We all were very, very close, and we had some amazing teachers who were, really, really passionate chiropractors, not necessarily like no teaching experience, but they were really passionate chiropractors, and they were really able to instill, they transferred that passion, I think, onto us. So we were kind of like, okay, what's the next challenge here? Bring it on.
That's crazy. I would say some people get stressed out enough about just themselves passing their board exams, let alone themselves and the school and their classmates all depending on them too. So that's crazy. But yeah, you had a lot of great chiropractors coming out of those first couple of years. They still come out of there good, but it was just interesting those first couple of years of forging a new school. So how did you get from living your whole life in New Zealand and going to chiropractic school in New Zealand to ending up in Ireland? Like, how did that whole happen?
I think from before I graduated, I wanted to travel. That was, the goal was to get the qualification and then do some traveling. And there were a whole lot of just kind of serendipitous, I think, events that took place. And I think I left New Zealand with about 2 weeks' notice to go to Australia to locum. And I had 2 weeks worth of locum work. And I was kind of like, I'm going to Australia. I think at the time I said, I'm going to stay for 3 months. I'm going to see if I can, make a go of locuming for 3 months with an initial 2 weeks of work. And I ended up doing that, I'd say, for about 1.5 years, I think, maybe 2 years.
Like just traveling around Australia?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Just traveling around Australia from locum job to locum job, and again, met some great people. It was a great community, and you sort of got to know other locums, and there'd be, like, there's a job going, I can't do it, do you want it? Or, does anybody know of work? And it was actually through one of the other locums that I knew that I was just having a chat with him one day, and he said, this guy, I think he'd been to Ireland before, and he said, this guy has asked me if I'll come back and work for him for a year. He wants to take a year off, and he was just in the process of like setting up his own practice, and he was like, it's not really great timing, I don't think I'll go. And I was like, geez, if you're not going to go, I'll go, like, pass on mine. I'm footloose and fancy free, I've got no real commitments here. So I didn't think any more of it. And like, I'd say probably 3 or 4 weeks later, I get this call from a complete random stranger who I'd never met before, and he said, I got your name off this guy, and he said you might be interested in coming to Ireland. And I was like, okay, then I guess I'm coming to Ireland. So that was in 2003, and I said, again, I committed to come for a year, and I am still here.
And that's what I tell often, even if I have university students or anybody who's interested in being a chiropractor that comes into the office and they're talking to me, and I said, the cool thing about chiropractic is it's universally accredited. Like, there's no other healthcare profession in the world that you can actually practice. You might have to write a board exam or have to do some things for licensing, obviously your immigration stuff, but besides that, you can practice anywhere in the world. And so it's pretty amazing to be able to just like, practice a little bit in New Zealand, practice a little bit in Australia, go to Ireland. That's pretty cool. So after the year, did you stay there, or how did that process go? Did you end up opening your own practice, or what happened?
I ended up staying in the practice, the initial practice, for 3 years. So kind of after 6 or 7 months, the principal chiropractor, so he was out of the country, and he sort of said, it seems to be going well. I'm happy where I am. Do you want to stay for another year? So I said, sure, I'll stay for another year, and ticked over into the 3rd year, by which time, of course, I had met the Irishman.
We always
So,
go, where's the significant other story?
yeah. So that kind of happened. So I met him within that first 3 years. So I'd committed to staying already for the second year before I met him. And then the third year was kind of like, okay, things are getting a little bit serious now. What's going to happen here? And so from there, I worked for him for 3 years, and then I actually locumed again for a little while. And one of the practices that I was locuming in, there was an opportunity actually to buy into that practice. So that was kind of when I was like, okay, looks like I'm going to be hanging around for a while here. Yeah, so that kind of whole process sort of went on over kind of a 5-year period to bring in me. So, I've kind of done all of the things, I suppose, from a locum to an associate to actually buying into a practice and becoming the principal chiropractor. So
That's good. And is that the one you're currently still in?
no, it's actually not. So the practice initially that I bought into was quite a distance away from where we were living, which was fine before I had children. And then once I had my first child, I kind of figured out that commuting an hour each way every day was not going to be sustainable. So again, and it kind of happened straight away, but eventually I sold that practice and started working again as an associate in my current practice, and again then had the opportunity to buy into that one. So
that's cool. And so you've experienced it from all different angles. I always ask, usually with a lot of my guests, if they ever had to shift out of that pain-based mindset of chiropractic into more of that vitalistic aspect of chiropractic. But it sounds like you kind of came out of the gates that way. How is that for you?
I think we're so lucky in New Zealand, and I know the program still is very much from a vitalistic perspective. And I'd say we were very lucky because it was always a very vitalistic. We had Phil McMaster was my first ever philosophy teacher, and he's the chiropractic philosophy commando, and so even down to like the language that we kind of were allowed to use in class versus not, and I know like it's crazy, there are so many schools now where they're not allowed to talk subluxation. It's like that was kind of all we talked about.
You weren't allowed to not talk subluxation.
We weren't allowed to not talk about it. And I suppose it's only with hindsight down the track, being exposed to different viewpoints, I suppose, that you kind of appreciate that and realize how lucky we were to get that grounding. But it is very interesting when you're locuming and you're going into someone's practice, and I remember a practice in Australia where I went in and he was like, right, so have you used an ultrasound machine before? And I was like, a what now? Like, I have no idea. And he was like, oh, it's real easy, you just do this. And I was like, how did I end up here? And it was a great practice. But so you do get exposed to a lot of different things as a locum, and not always to going into a practice that works in the style that you might be used to. And then I think also coming to Ireland, where chiropractic was not kind of held in the same esteem, shall we say, as it perhaps was back in New Zealand or Australia. Like I know, in Australia, for example, we could refer for x-rays to, just within the local health system. It was paid for by the government. So, people, there was no kind of discussion with people about whether they could afford x-rays or not. Like we were just like, you need an x-ray, referred them out. We got the x-ray and the report back. And then I came to Ireland, and it was a very different kind of model just generally in the country. And while there had been chiropractic care for a long time, and there were a lot of people who would be like, oh, I went to the first chiropractor in Ireland. And so that was interesting. But yeah, it was a very different coming here compared to what I was used to at home. And even just from the point of view of like there being fewer chiropractors, and even to get adjusted myself, I remember when I got here I was like, okay, my nearest chiropractor to get adjusted is going to be like 45 minutes to an hour drive away.
Wow.
So I sort of had to like go, okay, how am I going to manage? Because obviously I was used to being around chiropractors all the time and getting adjusted very regularly, and so that was a challenge in itself. It's just looking after my own care as well.
That's crazy. And so Because chiropractic is not regulated in the Southern Ireland, is that right?
That's correct. In the Republic of Ireland, it's not regulated as yet. Yeah.
Right. In Northern Ireland,
in Northern Ireland, they're part of the UK, so they have the same regulation rules as the UK.
Right. And so you're in the Republic of Ireland.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so that's kind of interesting too, because it's kind of like a little bit like the Wild West, sort of, right?
A little bit.
Well, it probably was more earlier on. Is it getting more established now?
Yes, I would say that it is, and we've had a few ups and downs with, some not so nice exposure in the media over the years that I've been here. But I definitely think that it is more. Is accepted the right word? Still very much by the medical profession. There's, we get a lot of people coming in saying that they've been told by their doctors not to come to a chiropractor, and I know this happens all over the world, but I think one of the big differences here is you don't have to be qualified to call yourself a chiropractor here. You don't have to have done any formal training. And it does happen. There are people who, we know are not chiropractors who are telling people that they are, or they're telling people that they're doing chiropractic adjustments, when they're not. And so we, through the association in Ireland, we kind of self-regulate, I suppose. So we really encourage chiropractors to join the association, because we kind of do all the vetting as part of the procedure to join the association. But there are a few, I don't know the exact numbers, but there are a few chiropractors in the country who are qualified but are not members of the association.
Right. And how many chiropractors in general are there in Ireland-ish?
So I think we have somewhere around 120 members of the association, and then somebody said to me the other day there could be 20 to 30 outside of the association.
Right. And what is the population of Ireland?
You're going to catch me out here. I'm going to say it's around 5 million.
Yeah.
I think when I came it would have been about 4 million, but I think now it's up around 5.5. So
that's still, the ratio is still crazy, like compared to like North America and Canada. Wow. That's, there's definitely not enough chiropractors in Ireland, eh?
Yeah, no, there's not. And in spite of there being, it being quite easy to come and work here, we struggle to get associates. We need more chiropractors here, definitely.
So if anyone wants to be an associate out there listening to this podcast or do locum work, you can go to Ireland, and then you get hooked up. So that's awesome. Because sometimes they have the opposite. There's new grads come out and they open up in North America, and there's chiropractors all over the place. So it's really hard to grow your practice at first because there's so many of them. And so that would be a little bit different story in Ireland. So I guess it's kind of a win and a negative. So the negative is there's not that many, so it's not that popular, but the positive is there's not that many. So especially if you're a good one, like if you provide good care, you probably blow right up. Your practice would be like, the word would spread really fast. So that being said, we'll talk a little bit. We always love talking about the Polyvagal Theory, but first of all, I was trying to ask Brandy. I was like, how did you hear about us, or how did you come into our world? Because we couldn't remember.
So I think that I had heard about the Vitality Shift. I just heard people talking about the Vitality Shift, but it was actually John and Marie Osborne who have been working with you guys for a long time. I knew that they had done some of your programs, so I gave Marie a chat and was having a chat with her. I think it was kind of in that middle of that COVID time, and I was like, I just need to, I need to do something. I need to, get some kind of mentoring or some kind of direction in what I'm doing. And so I had a chat to Marie, and she was like, 100%, you need to get involved with these guys and do their program. So I started off then. So this must have been, I don't know, 2022 maybe?
Yeah.
No, it feels like it must have been longer than that.
Maybe 2021?
Yeah, maybe 21. So it was definitely after our first lot of lockdowns.
Mm-hmm.
So I joined in with, got on board with the Vitality Shift, and then kind of jumped straight into the Vitality Engine as it was at the time. And I just found it really beneficial and great information and really helpful. And I just stalked you guys ever since, really.
Well, I was right during that time too, with the lockdowns and seeing everybody kind of changing their state and practice, like not only just the practice members, but also the chiropractors, right? And just understanding that something's different that wasn't like this before, and that's kind of where we kind of really got into the polyvagal theory. And so, what are some of the things about the polyvagal theory that kind of have stuck out for you that you've been able to utilize in your life or in your practice?
Well, I think it's one of those things, like I knew of the polyvagal theory, I'd heard about it, but I don't know that aside from that it related to the vagus nerve, I don't know that I really understood. I hadn't really researched it or looked into it that much. And like you said, post-COVID, it was like everybody was just crazy. Like, everybody was really crazy. And I think one of the huge benefits that I got from joining into the group, particularly with the Vitality Engine as it was at the time, was just to kind of be able to say, okay, I'm not going mad here like everybody. And because you guys have people from all around the world and everybody was experiencing the same thing, like, our regular people are coming in and they need more care, and we've got these new people coming in and they're kind of going, I'm not stressed. And you're like, oh, you're so stressed, it's unreal. I think when we started talking about the polyvagal theory, it was like, first of all, it was understanding what was actually happening with people, so that it was kind of like, okay, I'm not losing my mind, this is a thing, this is happening. And then having the tools to actually be able to talk to those people and work with those people. And I think, in practice, particularly for me, it's been, I think, and coming out of the New Zealand College, there was always a really heavy emphasis on being good adjusters. I think when you're kind of, you've been practicing for a while, like I've been practicing for a few years, and I was adjusting people the same way as I'd always adjusted them, and I was like, they're reacting, getting really sore afterwards, or we're not getting changes, and I was like, what is going on? And just understanding that, okay, I might have to lighten my force. I might have to, I think you talk about getting that physiological consent from people, which, that kind of concept I thought was just brilliant, because it's like, you have people on the table and they're going, yeah, it's fine, just go for it, just do what you need to do.
Just do it.
Yeah, and your body is totally telling me the complete opposite of that. And also understanding that how important my state was when I go in and put my hands on people and adjust them. So it's kind of not just like, you just take all your crap into the adjusting room, and that, I suppose understand, like I knew that, but now I know it on a different level, if that makes sense. So
it actually totally makes sense, because like I said, like the thing about the polyvagal theory for me is it's not telling me anything, well, except for the 3 different levels of the nervous system, like the 3 different hierarchy, like that's different than we learned in school. But like, it's so funny because so many of those nuances about present time consciousness, leaving your stuff at the door, like all those things, we learned that as kind of like a nuance or as a affirmation to say. But when you learn neurologically why that makes a difference with co-regulation, that like you cannot be a good co-regulator if you're dysregulated, like, and you just know that it immediately affects the nervous system, excluding your fake smile and your happy fake voice. If you're dysregulated, you're still giving off those vibes all the time. And so for me, that was like, again, you can always get told to do something, but until you understand why you actually need to do it and actually understand physiologically why that is so important, then it kind of makes sense, right? So then you're like, oh, that's why.
And I think, like we've talked a lot about self-care as well. And, I think there was a part of me that was always like, self-care, that's important. And then I'd keep not taking care of myself. And, you know, to kind of, I suppose for me, it was sort of like, okay, it's not just being indulgent. It's not just being, you know, selfish or whatever stories we tell ourselves about that self-care. It's like, if you want to be a good chiropractor, or not, I don't mean a good chiropractor, but if you want to be able to be there to help your people to the best of your ability, that actually that self-care is like, that should be part of your, you know, like you talk a lot about, you know, it's like being a professional athlete. It's like this has to be part of your preparation, so that you can perform to the best of your ability. So I think that's been quite a mental shift for me.
That's why I was trying to think of a word for it too, because you don't say you're a bad chiropractor or anything like that, but like that's why I like the word amplification, because I find that it helps, like, and that's even with the McDonald safety corridor stuff, just about the protocol, about checking the different levels of that safety corridor. It's not it doesn't replace the chiropractic adjustment. It's just another check to make sure that we're amplifying our effects, so that we're getting the kind of the ideal regulatory response post adjustment. And so I think that if you not master, but like optimize your self-care, then you just amplify everything that you do as a chiropractor.
Yeah. So I had a woman, she's actually a great example, just last week, and she had been a client, and then she hadn't been in for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, and she actually came in. Her father is also a client, and he encouraged her to come back in, and she came in and she was just like, I'm just so sore, like I don't even know if I can let you touch me, and I don't even know, you know, blah blah. And I kind of talked through a few things, and I said, look, let's just check you. I'm not going to do anything. Let's just check you. And then checking her, and I was kind of like, okay, let's just do a little bit of really gentle, like occipital work. Whereas I think in the past I would have kind of been like, I know you need to be adjusted. I know it's going to benefit you. So whether you want it or not, I'm just going to get in there and adjust you. And I sort of said to her, so like we just did some really gentle, I think I did some occipital work, and I maybe got into her diaphragm a little bit. And by the end of that, then also I was able to have that conversation with her about, you know, almost like why you don't want to be touched, and, you know, I can get this is what your nervous system's doing. And she had all these, you know, stress related symptoms going on, and it just really helps in communicating with people as well, that you can say you're not going mad. What you're experiencing is quite normal. This is what your body's doing, and this is why it's doing it. And you could kind of almost see her face going like, oh my gosh, like this makes sense to me. And then she was kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to book in for, you know, the next few appointments, and make sure that, you know, I can get a time that suits me, and I'm just going to book ahead. Like I didn't even talk to her about booking ahead. She was just like, I'm booking these appointments. So I think, you know, just having that language to be able to communicate to people, and that they know that you understand what they're going through, and that you're not going to do anything to put them in danger. So it is like that safety kind of, you know, giving them those safety cues. It's like, you know, we're working towards the same goal here, and we can do it in a way that is safe for you and comfortable for you. So and you are in charge of how this goes. So
it's so funny, because even when we used to go do a lot of Parker seminars back when I was first in practice, and Jim Parker used to have this funny little head, and he'd always talk about how to communicate with people, and how you would try to slip in the trap door. And if you could slip in the trap door, you'd actually get right into their subconscious mind, which would actually, they'd be able to understand it more and stay longer. And this is almost like one of those affirmations that we were talking about before. You're like, oh, that totally makes sense. But now when you see it through a polyvagal lens, once you like take away the danger cues, add safety cues, their brain opens up, because as soon as that fear response is gone, first they understand, they can make sense of what's going on in their body. All of a sudden that trap door opens, and then all of a sudden they're like it just changes their consciousness, and their brain basically comes online, and then they go, hey, this is good. I want to get more of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that actually just reminded me when you say their brain comes online. It's also like, when we try and explain everything to people when they're offline, they're like, you're kind of like, I'm going to give you all of this information, and you just get that blank stare, and you're like, they're not even like, they can't even hear anything I'm saying here. So I think being able to recognize that and kind of go, okay, let's see if we can bring them online first, and then we can talk to them a bit more about it, and they become a bit receptive then. So.
Well, I think that's the other thing I found so powerful with the polyvagal theory is just understanding the social engagement system and how that hooks into the regulated nervous system. And so you can just see, if you're really paying attention, you can see in someone's face if they're regulated or listening to what you're saying or not. And then that almost gives you consent as well to be able to give them information, because it doesn't mean that they're going to not get consent. They're just not going to absorb anything. And so often in the history of chiropractic, most of patient education or practice member education has been front loaded in the first visit or report of findings, when their brain is the most offline. And then when their brain's online, then we haven't, and we said we've already told them. We don't have
anything to talk to them about.
We've already told them, right? But like half the time you like ask them after the first visit what they said what you said on the first visit, on the second or third visit, and often they won't remember because they've been offline. Well, being in practice for like 20 years or so, or 25 almost, I'm at 25. What kind of words of inspiration would you like to leave people with, or say young chiropractors coming out of school? What kind of advice would you give to them, which you maybe thought you would have got yourself?
I think what I would say, particularly to young chiropractors, or if it was myself doing it again, I think one of the things I would say is ask for help and spend time around chiropractors that have been doing it for a while, and spend time with people who practice in lots of different ways. And I think we're so lucky in our profession that we have like our competitors in the chiropractic market, 95, probably 99% of them would be totally willing to sit down with a young chiropractor and answer questions or help them out or give them feedback, or just share their knowledge and experience. I think locuming is a great experience, but the one downside of it is often like you're in a practice but the principal's gone, right? So you don't necessarily get the kind of, there's not someone there that you can go, I had this person in today and what do I do? So so I think we have such a wealth of knowledge and experience within our profession, and it's kind of stuff that you can't learn in college. You can't learn until you've had your hands on bodies and you've been face to face with people. So that would be one thing that I would love to see young chiropractors doing. And I know there's people within the group that are doing kind of internships and things like that, and I just think like that's such a valuable experience for those chiropractors to be mentored one-on-one by people that have been in practice for 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah, and it's crazy that you get people who've been in practice. That's what I love, when they've been in practice like 30, 40 years and they're still learning, still sharing, still totally engaged in the profession. So you don't see that too much with other professions where people are still that excited. But we got a lot of chiropractors heading to work and coming to the end of the podcast, or wanting to looking for a little bit of inspiration. What kind of things inspire you? And what would you like to share with our listeners that might help inspire them?
Oh, that is a tricky one. I think one of the things that inspires me in practice is I love to see the look on people's faces when they get up off the table after they've been adjusted. And I think that's a really important thing to do. It's like to look at our people when they get off the table, look at their faces. Because, when you see someone who comes in like that and they're shut down and they're offline and they're just, they've got all this stuff going on in their lives, and then they get an adjustment, like for however long they're on the table, they get an adjustment and they get up and it's like the lights have come on. Like that always like just gives me such a buzz when I see that. So, I think when we're when we're in practice and we're going through the daily grind, sometimes it's kind of like, just next person on the table. And I think if we can just take that minute and look at the person in front of us and just see the difference, see the change in them, that they're taking that out into their lives, and that's going to then have a run-on effect to all the people that they come in contact with as well.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say the quote because I'll get it wrong, but that old quote of like, we just don't know how far-reaching the impact of that adjustment is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I try to remind myself of that from time to time, especially when it's been one of those days in practice and you're like, if one more person
totally.
says that to me, I'm gonna hit someone, and then you get the one person who comes in and they get adjusted and they just light up, and that's when you kind of go, okay, that's why we do what we do.
Yes. Well, and thank you, because when we were overdoing our McDonald's safety corridor, you adjusted me, and so you lit me up. So thank you very much for the adjustment as well.
Very welcome.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Really appreciate coming.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
And for everybody out there, I hope you enjoyed that story. That was it was very very cool to hear how she went from New Zealand and had her whole life switch over to Ireland, meet a man, be associate, be an owner, and still thriving in practice after being in practice for 25 years. So it's pretty darn inspiring. We still have a few spots left for Australia. So if anybody listening to this in Australia, we have a few spots left there. We have a few spots left for Denver. And then we are coming to Amsterdam. So we'll have information to that coming up soon. So if you want to check that out, just check out our website at theinformedchiropractor.com. And hopefully we'll see you somewhere on the road. And until next time, we'll see you later.